Ladies, gentlemen, and Horadrim of all ages, Diablo 4's Season 10 is coming up relatively soon in right around a month, and right now the PTR, the public test realm, is properly underway on PC, with lots of players jumping in and checking out new mechanics, new systems, the new seasonal stuff we're going to have going on, and very importantly, also the classes, the new balance changes that have been applied, the way that it all interacts with the new powers as well, the new Chaos Armor too, and of course with the existing builds from Season 9. So today we're going to do a little bit of a roundup of what is going on in the player base and the discussions going on about each class, the builds that are expected to pop off for each class when the season launches, and just what is looking either strong or interesting in general. But first up, a couple of major disclaimers, sort of caveats. This is the PTR. There are tons of bugs that will be impacting stuff, but without knowing what will or won't be fixed before the game goes live, I will be including bug stuff in the stuff I'm talking about today. As well, with this being a PTR, pretty much everything numerical is subject to change. For the most part, things like overarching mechanics and systems will just stay the same as they are in the PTR, but there's always a chance that they change something like what uniques can become chaos uniques, and that could suddenly shift the builds and the class power pretty dramatically too. And that's all to say, pretty much, take every part of today's video that talks about player power or build power with a big grain of salt. A lot of this could change with just numbers under the hood, so it's more about checking out the classes, what has changed for them, what's looking to be interesting or have potential when the season releases, and what sort of build diversity is looking like within the classes as well. Moving on then, let's start by talking about Barbarian. Most of the chatter around this class in the PTR is around a couple of main things. First, Mighty Throw, still seemingly the strongest build, at least for pit pushing purposes. It's just so far and above the rest that it would require some really major changes in how it functions to have other things surpass it. That said, core skill builds have definitely improved and gotten buffed since last season, most notably being Hammer of the Ancients being a much more usable skill again, and Dual Swing being at least decent as well. And it's important to note that Infernal Hordes is going to be where you'll want to spend the majority of the season, so something like Mighty Swing, which is pretty much just a pit pushing build, won't be what you want to use most of the time. Here's Cliptus here bursting through a tier 100 pit though, with a Hammer of the Ancients focused build, just to show that it can do that quite easily, tearing it up in under 8.5 minutes. And just for the sake of showing it off a little bit, this is how big of a deal the Chaos Armor system can be, because he has 4 out of the 5 possible Chaos Armor slots with Chaos Armor inside of them, as even the ones that are just moving, like Fists of Fates moving to a helm instead of a glove slot, are still guaranteed to be higher than a normal maximum roll on that unique. So you can see that he's got Fists of Fate with 360% damage potential, but he's also using both the Ugly Bastard Helm and Crown of Lucian, so 2 separate helmet uniques at the same time, which is a fun thing that you can do this season. Point being, Barbarian is going to have its strongest builds be stronger than they were last season, and specifically Hammer of the Ancients and Dual Swing should be strong enough to be properly competitive in almost all content that isn't specifically pit pushing, which, considering the main activity in Season 10 is going to be Infernal Hordes, is definitely a good thing to hear. Moving on then, we've got the Druid, and Druid is sort of just absolutely insanely bugged right now thanks to a specific power from the Chaos perks called Overabundance. This is one of the new seasonal things for Druid specifically. Every 50 spirit that you generate above your maximum increases your damage by up to 20% for 5 seconds. This sacks but does not refresh. The main thing is that players are saying is bugged about it, or at the very least definitely not intended, is that each stack stacks with each other multiplicatively. So let's say that your baseline damage is 100. Activate the first stack, it would become 120, 20% increase. If it were additive, when you get another stack, it would then boost that same attack up to 140. It would boost you another 20. Because it is instead multiplicative, it boosts it to 144. This may not seem like a massive difference, but in a well-crafted endgame build, you could theoretically hit 50 stacks. And with each one being multiplicative, it is a hell of a lot more than the amount of damage 50 additive stacks would be, because 50 times that interaction is insane. 50 additive stacks would bring a 100 damage hit up to 1100 damage. 50 multiplicative stacks turns 100 damage into around 910,000. So as you can see, that is an absolutely absurd difference at the scale of 50 stacks. Currently you're seeing this do a pit 150 with a Storm Ravens build, and from what I've heard from Druids, companions are going to end up being the strongest option for builds this season, pretty much no matter what, even with Overabundance itself definitely expecting to be fixed or changed in some capacity. On top of that, every Druid build in general general should see a general bump up thanks to Chaos Armor. Things like the Shred build being able to get Banished Lord's Talisman without an amulet slot, or Malefic Crescent without a weapon slot. Things like any build that uses Tempest Roar is now able to move that off of their helmet slot to free the helmet up for something like Air of Perdition, which is just a massive damage multiplier. Druid is definitely going to be in a good spot in Season 10 overall, at least from what it's looking like right now. Next up then, let's talk about Necromancer, and this one is both boring and fun, depending on how much you care about the engine behind the damage and the numbers that you're having, rather than just what you're actually pressing and what is on screen. Because Necromancer is looking strong as usual, and the main build behind it is Blood Wave. But not your normal Blood Wave, because this uses 2 of the new Chaos perks to change how it works pretty significantly. First, Alter the Balance turns Blood Wave into a core skill, so it gains the core skill tag, which lets you use it with anything else that relates to core skills, but also it loses its cooldown entirely, but now has an essence cost to cast. You then take Alternating Alterations as another Chaos perk, which is built for essentially dual core skill gameplay. It makes it so when you cast a core skill, your next cast of a different core skill refunds half of its resource costs and does up to 40% more damage as a multiplier, along with some other core skill boosts, but then you also get to use Bloodless Scream, which is normally a two-handed weapon, and you can instead have that as Chaos Armor on an armor slot, which frees up your two-handed weapon slot for further massive offensive gains. I've also heard quite impressive things about how Bone Spear and supposedly Skeletal Mages as well are looking right now, but the mages at least are just a bit of a pain to deal with because of minion AI, so I definitely imagine that Blood Wave is going to be the big winner in Season 10, without any significant changes from here at least. After that we've got Rogue, and Rogue is still in a bit of a tough position this season, it seems. This isn't to say that Rogue is a bad class or anything like that, but over the last couple of seasons, Rogue's peak power potential has simply been lower than the other classes, and going into Season 10, there is nothing changing drastically enough for the class in order to change that. The new unique is interesting, but it's not just like a straight up power increase, and it creates a sort of roller coaster of damage spikes due to the reload mechanic. And while it may end up being the highest theoretical damage build, it has a lot of issues, specifically being that the reload buff does not have any actual proper visual indicator on screen, at least not one that you can easily track. Same with the precision buff, of course, from the key passive for ranged core skills. It's just never been really clear on the UI, and with both of these things being difficult to gauge and track, it makes it near impossible to actually play correctly for most players, and so the generally expected best build for most people moving into Season 10, and probably the best one for Infernal Hordes anyways regardless, is once again going to be Death Trap. But it's looking like Rogue does have a couple of things that they have to use to make it reach top power that are quite an irritant to play around, and these are 2 Chaos perks that will be coming up again later too. Specifically, it's the unique perk, A Beast Cornered, which gives you increased damage and damage reduction for every 10% life you are missing, as well as making resource spending drain your life, but no lower than 10%. Then you combine that with the Marred Guard Chaos perk, which locks you to 50% of your health at a maximum, but gives you increased maximum resistances, increased armor, increased barrier, and fortified generation. The main use of this is to make sure that you never go above 50% health, so that you always have at least half of the potential bonus from the unique perk, which is a pretty solid damage modifier. But to put it simply, the increased danger of playing like this outweighs the survivability benefits that it gives. It does not even out, even with the increased resistances and the armor. No matter how you slice it, using these perks makes you squishier, but they do increase your damage quite a lot in exchange. This means that it will be awkward to play around them, but they should still offer you a lot of power regardless if you get good with them. As for Twisting Blades, which did have a solid spot in Season 9, it simply is getting way less out of these seasonal powers than it did last season, so I would expect that build to see a bit of a drop off in comparison. Past that, we've got Sorcerer, and there's sort of a dichotomy going on right now, of course, where there's the split between pit pushing and just general gameplay, which is a pretty wild and different sort of existence for this class. But that's sort of been the case for Sorcerer for a number of seasons now, where a lot of the best pit pushing builds feel terrible to play outside of the pit. That said, the Hydra build that was all over the place last season did get a bit of a nerf between Season 9 and the PTR, but it's still pushing on pretty strong in pretty much every kind of content. It's looking quite good right now, even so. It's doing quite well on the Infernal Hordes and Torment 4, which is, again, one of the places you'll be spending the vast majority of your time in Season 10, but the Fireball builds specifically are still very much popping off for pit pushing specifically, but that's still only if you get a pit layout that has has big open areas where they can properly bounce around without hitting walls, and then if the boss at the end also has adds, which is a pretty specific set of situations to mean that it is good for pit pushing and not much else. Splintering energy build should also still be very solid in this season, especially with the addition of the new Galvanic Azurite unique ring, but Hydra has looked the most consistent to me in the footage I've seen so far. One interesting thing of note here though is that a lot of sorcerers theorize the Mana Shield unique chaos perk to be potentially really strong and game changing for the class, as it basically gives you a ton of extra mana and mana regen at the cost of damage now coming from your mana pool instead of your health pool, which in theory would mean if you had enough mana regen, you could become functionally immortal and then still have that amount of just insane resource generation to spend on your skills for damage. But in practice, it seems that Mana Shield just drains too much mana from the damage taken from any meaningful enemies, which means especially for pit pushing, it is just sort of outscaling the player's ability to generate mana to begin with. Once you get to high enough pits, it does not work, making it non-functional at that stage of gameplay. But until you get to that point, it definitely does work, but immortality for things that are not pit pushing is sort of just not all that important as being able to bulldoze over them with damage, because you can easily hit a point of survivability where most stuff on Torment 4 doesn't really hurt you that badly, or at the very least you'll have cooldowns to prevent it. And then you can have a combination that we talked about earlier for Rogue, which is a Beast Cornered for bonus damage and damage reduction the lower your life is, and Marred Guard, which locks you to 50% maximum health, but increases your maximum resistances and armor and barrier and fortify generation, and this gives you a really nice proper damage multiplier in return as well, whereas Mana Shield, well, potentially making you immortal if you filled its conditions, wouldn't really give you that much more damage. So for the most part, the stronger Sorcerer builds I have seen on the PTR have all leaned into that combo with a Beast Cornered as the main thing that they get from their Chaos perks, and then just the ability to move around some uniques, especially off of weapons or amulets, is also a really big deal thanks to the Chaos uniques. Then finally we've got Spiritborn, and with nerfs to the Jaguar primary Spirit Hall and a couple of its double dipping methods, a large portion of Season 9's meta builds, the strongest builds for the class, have had a pretty major nerf. Quill Volley is way down as a core skill in general, Crushing Hand is a little bit better, and the Rake version of the Balazan's Max Lethal, Thorns and Poison mixture build that was on top last season should still be either the top or nearly top build for Spiritborn in Season 10, even with these changes. It will just have a notably lower peak. One build that stands to gain from this the most though is Evade Spiritborn, as it didn't use Jaguar primary Spirit Hall of course, which means it didn't get hit by the main nerf, though it did have some of its own changes. None of them are proper nerfs at least. As well, the secondary Eagle Spirit Hall bonus has been buffed to now make every other cast a guaranteed crit, and also give you 20% increased vulnerable damage. This then makes Loyalty's Mantle better, and Loyalty's Mantle is in the pool of potential Chaos uniques, so you could get something like Loyalty's Mantle as a pair of boots, which would then let you pair it with something like Air of Perdition as a helmet, or the Harlequin Crest for more cooldown-centric builds. So put simply, Evade build is moving up in the rankings for Spiritborn. Rake Balazans is still either the top build or the second top most likely, and I've actually also heard rumblings from some Spiritborn players about a potential build involving Razor Wings and the new unique for the class this season that's based around the Gorilla Ultimate skill, but I've not actually seen anything with that doing anything impressive in footage yet. That to say, Spiritborn is looking quite alright moving into Season 10. The balance has shifted a little bit, and whether it is meta or not, the new unique that we got will definitely create a new build archetype that could come into the fold in future seasons. That just about does it for today then everyone, a roundup of what's going on with all the classes in Diablo 4 during the PTR for Season 10. Again, pretty much all of this is subject to change before the full release of the season, but I always find it quite fun to check in on what everyone is doing during this specific time period, because I doubt you'll see Druids clearing pit tier 150 on live servers with the most random builds you can make, but you will definitely see it right now, and you don't even have to look that hard to find them either. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and let me know which class you are going to play when Season 10 releases next month in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.